Dawn, who has been live tweeting all day, is a graduate of the University of Nottingham with a master's in Russian studies, focusing on Soviet Russian metal music. She also holds a Bachelor of Arts in German and Russian from Nottingham University and a BSc from Nottingham Trent. Dawn currently works as an administrator in the School of Medicine at Nottingham University. And apart from metal music, she has also published on tinnitus and education. Over to you, Dawn.
Brilliant, thanks very much. So today I'm going to take you on metal's journey across the Iron Curtain to Russia in the late 1970s and early 1980s. You'll get to hear lots of examples, so I'll keep you awake. Firstly, let me explain how the Soviet system was closed off to the outside. In Soviet society, culture was restricted, meaning only official culture could be produced and played through the media and distributed in shops. All media and shops were state-controlled and so were not at liberty to decide what to produce and stock. Consequently, any music that was not officially allowed was not distributed in the usual fashion. But that did not mean that Western music, which was not officially allowed, did not enter from abroad. Diplomats, tourists, athletes, and other returnees and visitors brought physical records with them that were then bought as black market items and copied. Before tape recorders became available in the mid to late 1960s, X-ray film was used as a cheap and readily available source of plastic which could be written on like vinyl. These records on bones did not last very long, but epitomised the do-it-yourself ethos prevalent in Soviet society. It would be natural to assume that in Soviet society, anything unofficial that was not allowed was automatically illegal, but this is not true. What made music official or unofficial was more a case of who was playing it. All types of music were played by official, that is professional, musicians. In order to become official musicians, a band would need to perform before a committee and be approved. Then they had access to recording studios, expensive equipment, and were paid for work. Official musicians who played pop and rock music were usually part of a vocal instrumental ensemble known as a VIA. The music played by VIAs tended to be written by officially recognised composers, although self-penned music was relatively common and covers of some Western music were allowed, but lyrics at the very least would be scrutinised before anything approaching an official concert. Unofficial musicians were those who worked as amateurs, and they were not allowed to make money from any work as musicians, which included playing in cafes, apartments, private gatherings, and the like. It was also illegal to be unemployed, so many took advantage of the excellent Soviet welfare system and low cost of living, getting work as a boiler room attendant a few nights a week, or as a night watchman in a factory, earning enough to live on without compromising on creative time. Expensive equipment is one of the prerequisites for metal music. Without the distorted electric guitar, highly amplified electric bass guitar and full drum kit, just not metal. Metal started in the early 1970s in Birmingham with strong influences from American hard rock bands. In the same way as music entered the Soviet Union, metal music is primarily spread by physical copies of music crossing borders, first to Western Europe and the world's Anglophone nations, and then to other more advanced economies, before finally invading previously metal-free areas. Once metal music has entered a culture, it is copied by local performers before being translated into the local language. Soon, original songs are written in the local language, and then, especially in extreme and locally underground scenes, such as death and black metal, English returns and becomes the predominant local language. In Soviet Russia, it wasn't just metal that arrived in this manner, rock music did too. Rock music was frowned on at first because it was a Western import, but eventually the authorities could not stem the tide of youth exuberance and instead embraced a form of rock music in the official VIAs. It was not universally accepted, and rock music was constantly under scrutiny, but it was played by official bands at official concerts, and bands played all styles from soft rock to heavy metal, Western covers to home-composed material, although the majority were composed by composers from a much more traditional background. Metal started to appear in the late 1970s in Soviet underground rock circles and quickly spread into VIA repertoires, but this official metal had significant lyrical differences. Metal's lyric themes are dark, unsavoury, and generally negative. This was not something censors would allow to be performed regardless of music style, so the writers of lyrics of higher regarded Russian metal songs, be they band members or dedicated rock poets, had to come up with ways to mask the theme, or at least make it appear palatable without losing it completely. As to sing about something else would be to break the metal code, which happened a lot in the metal songs by the traditional VIAs. I think it's time for some examples from the early days, before the official and unofficial structure largely vanished in 1986. First, I'll present to you a couple of official but metal VIAs who were subsequently banned in the troubled period from 1985, since individuals and bands could be banned, but not whole music styles. The VIAs I have chosen are Kroos and Chorny Kofye. Cruz self-published their first metal album, Poslushaj Человек, in 1982. And this song was officially released on the State record company Melodia's label, Melodia, in 1983 as part of a compilation.
Прозрачной шелковой вуали, безоговорочно новых. Нивы на мостике стояли, внимая музыке Невы. И ваш лик дробился зримо в осколках Невской синевы. И были вы неотразимо созвучны с музыкой Невы. Невы, 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 увы, Невы. Внимали музыке Невы. Невы в ней сходство отмечали приливов Невских волн печали.
Now, from their fourth album, it's this is something that's much more what we would call the real cruise style these days.
Последнего не победителей нет, никто не спасется в схватке ракет. Кому же нужна всего человечества смерть? Кто вы безумные, дерзкие люди, готовые смерти скорбить нашу землю, утопить города в крови? Земля увидит свой последний рассвет, холодный мрак навек закроет солнцесвет. Солнцесвет.
Johnny Coffey's first album, Svietli Metal, was self-published in 1984, and they were metal from the start by VIA standards. Melodia eventually published it on a full Johnny Coffey album in 1988. From that to this. So there's definitely a difference between their VIA days and later. For a start, even the titles give away the supposed banality of the lyrics in their VIA examples. What were official bands singing about at the time? I've chosen Corrosia Metalla and Legion for this. The song I've chosen from Corrosia Metalla is definitely not safe from censors, which tells you it is very much underground.
Черный всадник, как дракон, тамплиеров вождь. Гордый праздник сатаны пролил кровь на свет, и священный меч войны разрубил секрет. Наш король, посланник небес, наш король, как призрачный бес, наш король, избранник судьбы, наш король, это лишь ты, Люцифер, Люцифер, Люцифер.
Corrosia Metalla stuck with their evil obsession and now style themselves as a Nazi metal band. Legion preferred something a bit more generic, going with history, in this eponymous case, Romans. Legion were around just before the band regarded as Russia's premier heavy metal band, and if they had had the same circumstances, would probably have been as big today. That band is Aria. I used them as a case study in my masters, and they occupy a unique niche in Russian metal history. The members of Aria were all professional musicians, but Aria were not a professional band. The members of Aria were all in a via called Poyushia Serca, Singing Hearts, who played relatively bland music. The Via's manager wanted to change direction, and the metal-loving members of Singing Hearts persuaded him to let them have a go under the band's official name. They released unofficial albums under their real name, Aria, using the recording studio available to the Via, but performed at first as Singing Hearts. So while they couldn't officially record officially or perform as Aria, they could distribute their music on relatively professional tapes and perform the music at in official circumstances. And since only the lyrics were scrutinised before concerts, the officials were often surprised by who turned up after the interval. But they were only Aria in their free time still, and had to make records and do shows as Singing Hearts the rest of the time. As such, they had a dual existence, both in official Soviet culture as part of Singing Hearts and outside of it as Aria. How do you exist outside of official culture? In his study of late Soviet Russian youth culture, anthropologist Alexei Yurchak coined the term vne, meaning outside, beyond, without, out with, not part of. He uses it to describe those who were not part of Soviet life officially, who did not participate in official activities but instead hung out in cafes or gathered in apartments. For our purposes, those musicians who played music in basements and restaurants rather than in concerts and on the radio. These people did not actively oppose the state. They were not anti-Soviet. They were simply outside of that structure. Being anti-Soviet requires an acknowledgement of the system, an acknowledgement there is a Soviet and a non-Soviet. One can be non-Soviet without being anti-Soviet, though, by simply not participating. This is where the unofficial not being exactly illegal comes in. Using metal music as an example, it wasn't officially allowed, neither was it officially banned. It might have been treated carefully by cautious officials, but it was still played by the Vias, albeit with all the punch taken out of the lyrics. Aria's influence were much the same as other early 1980s Russian rock and metal bands. Judas Priest, Deep Purple, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, American rock bands like Grand Funk Railroad and Creedence Clearwater Revival. They've been called the Russian Iron Maiden, so I'm going to play you a little bit of Iron Maiden, and then something which starts very similarly from Aria's first album, and then one of the most iconic songs from their second album.
You'll take my life, but I'll take yours too. You fire musket, but I'll run you through. So when you're waiting for the next attack, you better stand, there's no turning back.
стены, стальная плоть, стальная хватка когтей. Он копит силы, лениво ждет, направив в небо радар. Одна ошибка, случайный взлет и неизбежен удар. Все, во что ты навеки влюблен, уничтожит разом. Тысячеглавый убийца дракон должен быть повержен. Он сильнее всяких войн. Воля и разум.
What makes Russian metal, or rather, what makes it different from other metal music in its scenes? Russian metal's very particular and unique eruption out of the combination of Russian rock and Western metal, rather than simply out of Western metal, really coloured its style. The scene is recognisably metal, but most people find the Russianness is most prominent in its use of Russian language. But you can also find it in the depths and breadths of its literary influences, both Russian and global. Russian culture, with its melancholy and soulfulness, really lends itself to certain styles of metal too, although influences can be found across the genre. In other non-Anglophone metal scenes, English remains the dominant language of especially extreme metal. There's persistent talk that no other language works with metal, which has largely been proven wrong. Russian rock was also hesitant in using Russian at first, fearing it would interfere with the music, but musicians soon discovered Russian's lack of strict word order really helped, as well as their fantastic literary heritage. Russian metal simply continued that. Many non-Western metal scenes remain influenced by Western culture. For example, much of the Malaysian Borneo black metal scene is based almost wholly around the Norwegian black metal scene of the 1990s. This is a claim of authenticity, as scene members see Norwegian black metal as the most authentic. Seeing English is widely seen as authentic even in non-Anglophone nations, but this can cause problems. Using English can be considered a commercial, totally inauthentic decision, as it might mean that the bands seem to gain more fans and therefore more income. A major similarity between Russian metal and most other global metal is its call to action, which goes nowhere. Metal might try and play the bad guy when it's death and destruction, but largely actually deals with hopelessness and melancholy, playing right into the Russian cultural psyche. Even though the Soviet censors are gone, Russian metal bands continue to make metaphorical anti-war songs, epics dealing with inconsequential topics, largely meaningless power ballads. Even when there are defined calls for change, no alternative is proposed. Take this classic anti-war banger from Aria, for example, which I've provided a translation for. We're definitely inspired and on a high after that, but what for? Did we learn anything new? Do we know what we need to go and do? No. And there's not many metal bands that would tell you either, especially those so commercially successful as Aria, Iron Maiden, Metallica. So what have we learned? Well, we've seen how metal music crosses even closed borders and finds itself a transgressive niche wherever it lands. But not all borders and not all metal music are the same. We've seen how internal Soviet official borders tried to keep out the worst metal, but not by banning it, as that could be seen as the ultimate transgression. I've briefly touched on language in metal music and its potential to render the style inauthentic and commercial, and I've briefly touched on underground metal and individually banned bands, but there's not more time for that today. If you would like to know more, my MA Res thesis is available on ePrints. Thank you very much.